Hello, everyone. I hope that you are having a good end to your weekend. I wanted to check in and do a little bit of recap from our first week of our 2-week module on gifted education programming. So let's go ahead and clear that. This is a 2-week module, so if you're a little confused when we're looking at Blackboard for this 5th week of the course that we have coming up, we will still be in Module 4 on gifted education programming. And that's because it's a really important module that I wanted to take our time on, but also because this week we have a group assignment, and I didn't feel comfortable giving you a group assignment and a discussion post and another assignment in 1 week because I'm not that mean. So actually this week may feel a little bit lighter, which fell well considering we do have the July 4th holiday, and I'm sure several of you may be traveling. So I'm not going to actually do much recap content-wise on the discussion post, mainly because I want you guys to be working together this next week on your next assignment related to gifted education programming. But I did want to briefly talk about some of the differences between acceleration and enrichment and how this leads into a level of services approach, or LOS. Other researchers will call level of services a gifted education curriculum, so you might see that in the literature. But the main difference when we think about acceleration versus enrichment, in acceleration, the key there is jumping ahead or doing things more quickly. So when we think about acceleration, we think that the first grader is now going to go ahead into the second grade curriculum, or the second grader is going to go ahead maybe even up to the fourth or the fifth grade curriculum. So acceleration is all about going ahead, where enrichment is, I don't want to make this sound too hard of a rule because there's a lot of types of enrichment and acceleration, but typically we think of enrichment as going deeper or extending in a different manner. So with enrichment, oftentimes the students are within the same classroom as their same age peers. They're exploring the same academic content as their same age peers, but they're exploring that content either differently through a different process or at a deeper level. Typically, when we think about enrichment, that would also include some of the, for lack of a better term, more extracurricular types of services that we would provide for our gifted students, such as work in an after-school program like Destination Imagination or some leadership development. The key with enrichment is that in order to be successful, it really needs to be carefully crafted. So we see in the literature, as you've read, that there's a lot of support for acceleration. I want to be careful not to equate that to there not being support for enrichment. So enrichment is also important, but it has to be constructed very thoughtfully. So enrichment is really only successful when it's appropriately tied to the academic content that the students are going through. I can actually remember when I was in gifted education for some of my elementary years, I can remember our pull-out classes just feeling really random, and they had nothing to do with anything else I had studied. And that's an example of enrichment not very well tied to the standards that I'm working on. So enrichment can definitely have a great impact, but we want to make sure that it's not designed in a way that the students just feel like it's random or extra and doesn't actually tie to the other academic content that they are exploring. There's actually kind of a false dichotomy between acceleration, and enrichment. They do seem to go hand in hand, and as you saw in that levels of services approach, there are some opportunities for enrichment and some for acceleration. So I don't want you leaving this course thinking that gifted programming can either be acceleration or enrichment. Usually it's somewhat of a combination between the two. But the typical delineation is acceleration is skipping ahead, and enrichment is either learning differently or learning at a deeper level. Again, enrichment can be very powerful, but it requires a very appropriately trained teacher. when we study curriculum for the gifted and talented and another course for your endorsement, we'll dig deeper into those differentiation strategies. But for now, I just wanted to give you a good delineation between the two. And that's all I want to say currently about this discussion post, because I want you to use the discussion that we've had going in your library materials going into week 5 that we have. So for week 5, you only have one assignment. So just to be clear, there is not a new discussion post for this week. Given that fact, I would encourage you to keep up with the discussion post from last week. I'll continue to post questions and or make comments, so let's keep the discussion going, but you don't have a new post due for this week 5. Again, that's my July 4th gift. In terms of this week, you have a group assignment, and this assignment is directly tied to the case study from last week. So at the end of that case study, for, I believe it's Mayfield School District, they mention that there is a committee that is put together that is constantly called to address how well are these gifted education services working. So how well is our district doing at meeting the needs of our gifted and talented students? That in and of itself is a great strength. In fact, in your discussion post, several of you mentioned how good it was that Mr. Draper said, let's put a committee together to analyze the impact of this gifted program. So for your group assignment, you're going to be working with either 3 or 4 other students. And you are going to be acting as that gifted education committee. Okay, so as a gifted education committee, I want you to discuss with each other, and you're writing one critique. Okay, so you're not each writing a whole critique. You're writing one critique that answers the following questions. Again, these are all on Blackboard, but I like to just kind of speak through the assignment. So you're going to address first, the strengths of the existing program. Okay, you have a lot to go off of because that was your discussion post from last week about those best practices. So as a committee, what would you tell Mr. Draper? Here are the strengths for our gifted education program as it is, and this is where it's supported by the research. So that's task 1. Number 2, I want you to provide some opportunities or suggestions for improvement. This could include, hey, I think we need to add something. I think we need to actually delete something from the proposed services, or we just may need to kind of touch up some of the services. So first, this is what we're doing well. Second, here's some suggestions for improvement. Third is an analysis of how this gifted program aligns to the NAGC gifted education standards. So those gifted education standards were in your library last week. I actually put a note there to make sure you downloaded them because you will be referring to those several times, probably within other courses as well. So for the third component of this critique, you're going to be looking at how are my gifted education suggestions, how are they going to help this program better align to the NAGC standards. Now, there's a lot of standards, so I'm not expecting you to go through every single standard, but I do want you to start familiarizing yourself with these standards so you can, in this critique, give a lot of specific examples that say, hey, in the programming standards, for example, NAGC calls for highly trained and qualified teachers to educate the gifted. So perhaps in your critique of the gifted education program, you suggest some kind of modification that requires these teachers to have an endorsement in teaching the gifted and talented. That would be specific evidence that we are meeting the NAGC standards. So that's your third component. And finally, the fourth component, I want you to consider any potential challenges that the district may come in contact with in promoting these gifted education services, and maybe some practical solutions for how to overcome these challenges. So just to continue on the idea I previously mentioned on hiring quality teachers, okay, well, we have this challenge of money, like we always have in education. So that's okay. I just want you to think practically. Will we really be able to require endorsement? And if so, what are some ways that we can overcome that challenge? So again, to recap, as a group, you are answering what are the current strengths of the gifted program? You are answering what are some proposed methods to improve the gifted program? How is the gifted program aligned to the NAGC standards? And fourth, what are some potential challenges that we may approach, and how could we overcome those challenges? You should not go over 5 pages. I said 4 to 5 pages, and when we think about splitting that up, I would probably suggest within your group everybody take the lead on one of those 4 questions. As always, there's a rubric that is accompanying this assignment. So just make sure that you are reading through that so that you're clear on what the expectations are. I really like this assignment because it gets you working together, and you guys are all passionate about gifted ed, but also you have little niches in gifted ed that you are more passionate about than others. So I like to see how students with diverse opportunities and diverse points of view come together and really work well together. This is also explained on Blackboard, but just to clarify, there is a tab right along that left side. And I'm sorry, the camera is mirroring, so I'm trying to remember this is left. But there's a red tab that's labeled Small Work Groups. And if you just click on that tab, then you can access what group you've been assigned to, and then you can also access a group discussion board from there. That's how you can initially contact each other. If you want, you can share emails and then create a Google Doc, or you can give each other your phone numbers, you can meet up, whatever you want to do. But you have the whole week to work on this assignment. And again, this is the only assignment for the week. I would suggest that you make initial contact with each other by Tuesday, just to make sure that you're all on the same page and you know who's working on what. And that way there's not any weekend scramble. Everyone will be responsible for uploading a copy of the assignment, so don't be concerned. I realize that means I'll get 4 of the same submissions, but I know it can be kind of confusing to make sure someone submitted your work, so just to avoid that, I'll have everyone submit their own copy. Okay, so I hope that you have a wonderful July 4th. If you're traveling, travel/fly safely. And hopefully the fact that we don't have a discussion post will, you thought she wouldn't come. Hopefully the fact that you don't have a discussion post this week will let you maybe have a little bit more time with your family or friends. If you have any trouble contacting each other, please let me know as soon as possible. I am more than happy to help, and I look forward to seeing what you guys work on. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I, as always, am here if you have any questions or comments. Okay, thank you.